It is good to be back with the morning news updates on Early Exchange. I am Olaoluwa. Stay tuned for developments in Nigeria, other African countries, the UAE, and the West. Once again, welcome to the morning news update. I am Olaoluwa Awe. The federal government in Nigeria has announced that the long-awaited completion of the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway is set to be opened mid-September. Minister of Works Dave Umahi shared this update during a visit to the completed and ongoing federal government projects in Lagos State on August 29, 2023. Construction is currently in progress on the final sections of both sides of the expressway, which had faced multiple missed completion deadlines. Umahi's tour included sites such as the Outer Marina Road, Eko Bridge, Ijora Olokpa, the Lagoon section of Eko Bridge, and Apapa, with plans to inspect the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway and other projects in Lagos and Ogun states. Moving on, the federal government, or the federal minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, has announced that the Millennium Tower project in Abuja will be completed within the next 2 years. The project, situated in the central area, aims to be a versatile complex offering recreation, hospitality, cultural activities, socialization, and commercial spaces. The tower, handled by Salini Construction Nigeria Limited, is expected to reshape the FCT's landscape and contribute to making Abuja a prominent global city. The project, which has reached 40% completion, will feature a panoramic restaurant, cultural center, exhibition halls, commercial areas, sports facilities, and a luxurious hotel upon completion. The federal government plans to compensate Giwa or Jiwa community in Abuja with 825.819 billion naira for building a 4.2 kilometers second runway at Nnamdi Ezekwe International Airport. The FCT Minister Nyesom Wike announced this after a negotiation meeting with the Minister of Aviation Festus Keyamo. The Jiwa community had requested 2.5 million naira per hectare in compensation. The money is intended to encourage cooperation from residents who will need to leave the area for the runway's completion. Additionally, a 5 kilometers bridge will be built in Tonga Madaki. A healthcare facility will serve as temporary housing for the residents. Meanwhile, a building in the Federal Capital Territory reportedly belonging to some traditional rulers was demolished by the Federal Capital Development Authority for being constructed on unauthorized land. This action follows the commitment of FCT Minister Nyesom Wike to address buildings that violate the Abuja Master Plan or are built without proper approval in the capital city. The building, a costly complex on plot 226 in Wuse Zone 6 district, was allegedly built by another man who built a duplex on it against warnings. Director of the FCT's Development Control Department, Mokhtar Galadima, confirmed the demolition, stating that they investigated the land ownership due to conflicting claims. Moving away from Nigeria now, Ghana is gearing up to host the inaugural African Paralympic Games in 2023. The president of the National Paralympic Committee of Ghana, NPC Ghana, Samson Dean, announced this significant event, saying the preparations for the Games have already begun, aided by the Ministry of Youth and Sports, with a goal of offering participants a memorable experience. This championship will determine which African nation qualifies for the IWBF Paris 2024. This event will also serve as a prelude to the All-Africa Games scheduled for 2024 in Ghana. It marks an important opportunity for African athletes with disabilities to showcase their skills and compete on the international stage. The president of the Paralympic Committee in Nigeria, Sunday Odebode, announced that Nigerian athletes have been undergoing trainings for the Games and are fully prepared to compete in various sporting events. The team will participate in wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis, and amputee athletics, both in the male and female categories. Moving on, the Malian interim president, Assimi Goïta, has signed into law a new mining code that will allow the military-led government to increase its ownership of gold concessions and recoup what it regards as a major shortfall in production revenue. According to the government, the new code, which was signed on state television late Monday, will permit state and local investors to take stakes as high as 35% in mining projects compared to the present 20%, and could more than double the gross domestic product GDP to about 20%, although it is not clear at the moment whether the code would affect existing projects. A mining ministry official last week said that this would depend on the implementing decrees which are yet to be made available. The Malian's finance minister, Alassane Sano, Monday evening disclosed that an audit of the mining sector had shown that the state was missing between $497 million and $995 million, which it intended to recover. And moving to the Middle East, an Abu Dhabi-based holding company and the largest healthcare platform in the Middle East, Pure Health, has signed a deal to acquire UK's largest independent operators of hospitals, Circle Group, in a deal valued at $1.2 billion, according to the managing director and group chief executive officer of Pure Health, Farhan Malik. This acquisition forms part of Pure Health's global expansion program, which includes acquisition previously acquired in the US and entry into international markets. Additionally, patients in both countries will benefit from this acquisition, both through the diversity of choice in healthcare provision, expanded network of medical professionals, and expertise combined with knowledge sharing, which will be developed. Away from that, former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan's prison sentence for a graft conviction was suspended yesterday, but it is unclear if he will be immediately released, according to his lawyer. Khan's imprisonment stems from failing to properly declare gifts received while in office. The Islamabad High Court overturned a lower court's decision to imprison him for 3 years, a ruling that barred him from upcoming elections. While his party and lawyers said he was granted bail, they expressed concerns that he might be rearrested due to some other cases against him. Moving on, a county in eastern China is offering a reward of 1,000 yuan, about $137 to couples if the bride is 25 years old or younger, as part of efforts to encourage young couples to get married and have children. The move comes amid concerns about China's declining birth rate and aging population. The county's notice also includes subsidies for childcare, fertility, and education for couples who have children. China's marriage rate hit a record low in 2022, and the fertility rate dropped to a record low of 1.09, largely attributed to factors like high childcare costs and economic concerns. Moving on, in an attempt to encourage foreign firms struggling to attract talent post-COVID, the Chinese Foreign Ministry yesterday announced that China will extend preferential tax for foreign nationals working in the country through to the end of 2027. Foreign chambers of commerce and business organizations in China has been seeking clarification on whether the government would further extend the policy that enables foreign nationals to benefit from taxable deductions on house rentals, children's education, language learning, and other costs, according to a senior director at the China-Britain Council, Kiran Patel. As China's economy slows, authorities have struggled to revivify foreign investment, with global firms not impressed by new incentives they say fall short of sweeteners once used to attract overseas money. Moving on, job openings in the United States decreased to the lowest level in almost 2.5 years in July, indicating a gradual slowdown in the labor market. The decline in job openings supports the expectation that the Federal Reserve will maintain unchanged interest rates in the coming month. The decrease in job openings was led by the professional and business services sector, as well as healthcare and social assistance. Despite the decline, labor market conditions remain tight, with more job openings than unemployed persons. The unemployment rate was 3.5% in July, near historic lows. Now, the Biden administration has revealed the list of 10 prescription drugs that will undergo price negotiations by the U.S. Medicare program, covering 66 million people. The list includes Eliquis, a blood thinner from Bristol Myers Squibb and Pfizer. This marks the first time that Medicare will negotiate drug prices. The move is part of President Biden's effort to reduce drug costs and provide relief to seniors, with prices on the negotiated drugs expected to decrease for up to 9 million seniors. Now, the decision by the French government to ban children from wearing abayas, loose-fitting robes worn by some Muslim women in state-run schools, has sparked both applause and criticism. France has upheld a ban on religious symbols in state schools since 2004 to maintain its version of secularism known as laicide. The ban was prompted by an increase in breaches of secularism, with students wearing religious attire like abayas and kameez. While some conservatives welcome the move, critics on the left and academics argue that it could stigmatize Muslims and overlook the fact that these clothes can be worn for fashion or identity rather than religious reasons. And away from that, the widespread disruption to UK air travel caused by a fault with National Air Traffic Services (NATS) was not due to a cyber attack, as confirmed by the United Kingdom government. More than a quarter of UK flights were cancelled on Monday due to the issue, leading to delays and cancellations continuing into Tuesday yesterday. The Civil Aviation Authority will investigate the incident, with the exact cause of the technical fault to be determined. Transport Secretary Mark Harper stated that it will take several days to fully resolve the situation and emphasized that the disruption was not the result of a cyber attack. And that's the morning news update. Thank you very much for watching. I am Olaoluwa Awe. I'm sure Ayo Blessing and Idaosa have a few things to say about the developments in the news. Let's get back to them.
Thanks for staying tuned. Like Olaoluwa Awe said, we do have a few things to say about some other news stories as we take a deeper look at them. Idaosa Osamanze, Director, Policy and Research, Africa Development Studies Center, ADSC, is here again today. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the show.
Blessing, my honor to be here. Aya, you're looking good.
Thank you very much. You're looking good.
Looking good is big business.
Yes, and a very good one at that.
Good morning, viewers.
All right, Ayo, they've already told you that you look good. I need not say any more. Well, let's get on to the news. The federal government has announced that the long-awaited completion of the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway is set for mid-September. The Minister of Works, Dave Umahi, shared this update during a visit to completed and ongoing federal government projects in Lagos yesterday. So, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway is set for mid-September, and we're just a day away from September. So how does that come for those who probably ply the road, or even as a Nigerian? What's your take on that?
What a relief it was yesterday using that route. I think it's almost completed. There's just one spot around the Otedola Bridge where work was going on yesterday. But after that, going toward Mowe, all those areas now free and traffic is moving. And this is great relief for Lagosians, especially those who are living in the outskirts of Lagos. Coming to access Lagos had been a nightmare in the last 3 years.
There was a time we talked about transportation and traffic around Lagos, and Ayo gave the example of a girl who was asked which is the longest distance she's ever traveled, and she said the Mowe Road.
Yeah, really. It hasn't just been a nightmare, it has been daymare. You know, daymare could be worse than nightmare for, not just for Lagosians, but for everybody who plies that road. I stand to be corrected. That seems to be the busiest road in Nigeria. I'm not so sure. I mean the Lagos-Ibadan express road, because it leads to the east, leads to the north, and what have you. So now that we have a definite date of completion, we've missed a lot of deadlines here. This is one road that has started. I mean the reconstruction. So during Jonathan's era, if I am not so wrong. Then we had 8 years of Buhari administration on it, and now we're having it completed. Kudos to the federal government. We do know that to get a good job done is not really something you can rush. Of what essence is rushing a project, and at the end of the day, potholes start to appear. So I say congratulations to Lagosians and to other users of the road who are not resident in Lagos, but they use that particular road. That's just my take.
23 years or 24 years of construction.
Wow. Wow. So it's a landmark achievement after all.
Because of celebration, really. Yes.
Okay, I think we need to wait for mid-September so we really know what to celebrate.
Yeah, what I saw yesterday, I think the road is good to go.
All right, if you say so.
But except that if the last approval of the presidency of reconstructing the Third Mainland Bridge is anything to also expect in this year, that could also be another challenge, especially those who will be traveling coming into the island. Yeah.
We'll wait and see. Some developmental stride seems to be happening in Nigeria as the federal government plans to compensate the Jiwa community in Abuja with 825.8 billion naira for building a 4.2 kilometers second runway at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport. So the FCT Minister Nyesom Wike announced this after a negotiation meeting with the Minister of Aviation. So a second runway for the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, and then compensating the host community where the land is going to come from, or where they're taking land to build a second runway. Is the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport really that busy? Do we also need another runway for Murtala Muhammad Airport? Should we be seeing these developments going round to some major airports? But these two are like the major airports in Nigeria, the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport and then the Murtala Muhammad Airports in Nigeria. You know, sir.
I think if you look at what group approaches are, you see one runway is not enough for a federal capital like Nigeria. Even smaller countries have multiple runways. So I think it's heartening to note that, of course, the residents of that area now being relocated, and the government is also set to compensate them. For me, it's kudos to Nyesom Wike, the action man, and has been on the news since day one. He's actually the one who has hit the ground running.
Okay.
And is actually is running. Kudos to Nyesom Wike, and he's trying everything within his power to see how to get Abuja to take a new look, and then ensuring that work is on and everybody is getting their due deserts. So I think it's very commendable on his part.
Okay, and apart from the fact that one runway may not be enough for a capital territory, I do believe that at this point we are not just building for the present; we are building for the future. When some governors embark on road construction, the argument in some quarters is that okay, who needs these number of roads? But then, the roads that were built before now were built for a particular population that was targeted. Now we are increasing every day. And so if we're having a second runway, apart from serving immediate need when it is completed, then we are building for the future, because Abuja will continue to expand. And it is a capital territory. Trust me, it gets very busy.
It's not just expansion, it's also economic.
Yes.
I lived at the back of Dubai Airport. 5 aircraft can land at the same time and take off at the same time. Here, only one can land. So you cannot actually get the traffic that you need in that airport to generate the kind of activities or economic activities that airport can actually generate. So which means if one flight is coming, because even the current runway in Abuja is using both local and international.
Yes.
And so this makes it really very difficult to schedule flights. And then you'll be able to say people have access to Abuja and come out at will. So sometimes you want to book a flight to even leave Lagos for Abuja, you have an issue because there's just one runway. So you have to overschedule it. So if you have multiple runways, you see, multiple airlines can arrive at the same time. And then, of course, as more people enter into Abuja, more money come into Abuja. And as more money come into Abuja, the economy is prospering. And, of course, the poverty is going, like the president has said.
Now, talking about Nyesom Wike hitting the ground running and being someone who's got so much action, you know, he talked about demolishing buildings that were built on unauthorized space or in unauthorized areas. So, a building in the Federal Capital Territory reportedly belonging to some traditional rulers have been demolished by the Federal Capital Development Authority for being constructed on unauthorized land. So this is a message to people who were probably in doubt before if Wike met what he was saying when he gave that notice, that if land belonging to reportedly some traditional rulers could be demolished, then of course no one will be spared if you are on the erring side.
Well, like we said, body language matters. Now, when you make a pronouncement, you follow it up. While I want to say the fact that, okay, we don't have anybody in mind, I mean, this is not an attack on the person now, it is a policy issue. Abuja has a master plan. And part of the problem with us in this part of the world is that we assume that we can bypass what is legal, what is allowed. If we have a master plan that says you cannot build this here, and some people, maybe because they got to know some people in some quarters, they said, okay, let's just go ahead and do this. Now, a new sheriff is in town who is not just talking, but he is doing it. The onus is now, on those who still have unapproved buildings on some portions of the land or elsewhere in the capital territory to do the needful. Go and consult. If you are not meant to be there, then find a way to move whatever can be moved before the bulldozers come. Because for sure, Wike has started. I don't see him stopping for whatever reason until we stick to the master plan. That's the way I see it here.
Yeah, I think it's important that land speculators have to be dealt with. You see, some people are very terrible, and some of them may not even have the authority to build. I remember some years ago in Lagos here, where we have our church site, somebody entered into the premise and just started to build. And he raised it up to 2-story building until the governor of Lagos State, then Bola Ahmed, who's the president now, entered into that place and saw that that building was up. And they have to pull it down. He bought it from nobody. He just saw the empty land, entered it, and started to build. So there's a whole lot of land speculation, and that's what Wike has spoken to. You see, there's some people who call themselves area father. They sit in the look at area and sell it without even being the owner of the property. And I think these are what we should deal with and sanitize our system, clear it of this kind of miscreant, and so that we can actually have a city that is befitting and looking good. And then, of course, following plan, and those areas where people should have park, there should be park. There should be places for recreation. Children should have access to play, and the whole place is not too congested. I think that's the right thing to do.
Not to mention the problems that associated with land tussle that will actually be reduced, because when such things happen, they don't just sell to one person, they sell to multiple people, and you find these people begin to struggle amongst themselves for who owns the land eventually. So it's a lot of battle, sometimes legal battle, and dangerous battle that some may even lose their lives. So it will go a long way in tackling such issues. Now let's go away from Nigeria as we get into China, where a county in eastern China is offering a reward of 1,000 yuan. When you convert that to the United States dollars, it is $137. So they're offering this reward to couples if the bride is 25 years old or younger. Now, this is part of a plan to encourage young people to get married and have children. Aya, are you at this time wishing you were in China?
From me? I would
you
have
were closer to me here.
Idaosa.
So,
who needs a younger wife, really?
You better be careful with that.
Oh, let me, okay, I didn't say that. I didn't just say that. We have to be careful here. Okay, we do know that China has this peculiar problem. That is the most populous country in the world, really. And at some point, there was this, birth control policy that was in place to ensure that, they control their population. But now, the population is aging, like the report we read, and they're now saying, okay, well, young people, you get incentivized to marry young. Talk about different strokes for different folks. Some boys here were jubilating to that news when it was read earlier on the show. I just said, okay, well, you are not in China, unfortunately. We're in Nigeria here, where you can't afford. It's a luxury for you to marry that young. Well, for China, we have to be careful, much as they want to, show up their population with younger people. But then we should be careful about, going to the zone of child marriage, because they say 25 years or below. The issue is at what point do people stop? So you don't go again and start bringing in too young women to marry. But if that is what they think will solve their problem for now, and they want to incentivize them, Chinese people, and go ahead, and Nigerians who can go over there and want to marry early, please, if you want to.
Now, the package also includes subsidies for childcare, fertility, and education.
Yeah, but you see, the real issue is depending on how you design your system. For example, in some claim, adulthood is 15. For us in Nigeria, it's 18. And if you go to typical Islamic countries, say for women, say from age 13, they're seen to be ripe enough to actually get into marriage. You can call them child marriage or whatever it is. But you see, culture has a way of defining some of all these issues. So what you're dealing with in China today, you're dealing with a country that used to be growing up, but now is growing down. And so this is a very serious challenge. And of course, many of the young people are not, they've been encouraged not to marry for a while, and now they are enjoying the movie. So the government is now faced with a challenge of the future. What you see is a government that is futuristic, and they are looking at themselves and see what are we going to become in the next 5 or 10 years. And this is always a strategic thing that China takes. I give you a very short example. You see, around 15 or 20 years ago, Chinese government gathered the country's businessmen and asked them one simple question. In the 1980s, America moved their company to Japan because labor was cheap. In the 1990s, they moved from Japan because labor had become expensive in Japan, and they came to Malaysia and all these things. In the 2000s, they see that labor had become expensive in Malaysia, they came to China. Now, what are we going to do? Are we allowing them to move their companies out of China? Because that has been the course of history. And they came up and said, look, what is really factor? And they said the factor here was labor. How do we stop labor from going up? They channel all their whole energy into humanoids and robotics. And today, almost 60% of the workforce in Chinese factory are robots and humanoids. And so, you see, they have been able to stabilize the cost of labor, so that even if you have a downturn in your economy or recession, and you are not willing to, you just turn off the switch and the robotics stop working. They won't go on strike, they won't protest, so the cost of labor won't go up. So they are able to stabilize the economy so that it can stay. So you're seeing what they are looking at today, that if we continue like this, and in the next 50 years, you know the percentage of your population who are aged, who will no longer be there, and you see where you are, will you still be able to sustain this structure? So they are thinking for tomorrow. And that is very critical. And I think that's what every government should do. Not really living for today. We should be able to live for the future. Now, bringing that home, living for the future, planning for the future, we have a reverse issue. They have the problem of not having enough population, so they are encouraging the young people to get into marriage and have children. We have the issue of being overpopulated. So is there a way to incentivize that? What is the strategy to address that ahead of the future for Nigeria?
Well, we don't need to incentivize not having children.
Or not having too many children.
So what will make it happen is making it happen. People are finding it difficult to I don't talk about 3 square meals. To even have whatever shape of meals 3 times a day is becoming difficult. Gone are those days when an average family in Nigeria will say, I want a family of 4, I want 4 children. Go and ask young people today, how many kids would you like to have? They will talk about 2, at most 3. Only very few talk about 4 or 5. We are facing the realities now. Why do we think we have a lot of single mothers, like we talked about yesterday? Because families could not come together and feed their children. So, in a sense, we are learning from history. And the history is manifesting right in our presence. So an average Nigerian knows that except those in rural areas who still don't, get enough education, which is where we should channel, energy. The government has spent a lot of money on, promoting family planning through different radio dramas in all languages that we speak in Nigeria here. And I think we are getting to that point where people are taking note of the essence of those campaigns. For us, I don't think we need to incentivize not marrying early. We get it.
I think the issue, there are a lot of factors. You can't zero in on, for example, this is because poverty, people don't want to marry. And I think the real issue, which is of course is scientific, is the value and the size of our GDP vis-a-vis our population. Having a youthful population for us is an opportunity and it's a plus for the country and for the economy at large. And I think what we need to do is how to program the economic landscape so that these young people can really be adequately, engaged, and they are doing a lot of things meaningful. One of the issues that we have raised in the past is the size of land that is not increasing, because land is critical for production, because it's the most fundamental means of production. Here, I think what governments should really do is to see how we can embark on vertical growth rather than horizontal growth. So there's a whole lot of things that we can do. And of course, we also need to leverage the new oil, which is ICT. So where people don't need to really be in the farm and they can actually be doing a whole lot. Farming can be done on vertical buildings.
Yes.
And then we'll still be able to provide food security for our people, and everybody is engaged. If the GDP is growing, it's just like we argue in terms of debt, that debt to GDP ratio for Nigeria is small, but debt to revenue is very, very close. Now, if you have a debt to revenue that is, the margin is so close, then what you have is that you can't borrow more because you will not be able to pay back. You are using all your revenue to service your debt. But in case you are able to raise your revenue, then of course you have leverage to take more facility. And I think that is also what it is in terms of population growth. Yes, we may put an eye on population, even there are a lot of people who even don't want to marry. Yeah, because it's not even really because of family issues. You are having people who just feel all they need their freedom, and they just want to have a child anyhow, and that's all. If 1 or 2 is okay for them, and they don't even want to stay under the control. That is a social lifestyle that you're seeing. It's really not because people don't want. There are a whole lot of people who have money, but yet they don't want to stay in a marriage, which is seen to be something like an imprisonment or bondage. So there are a whole lot of factors that are responsible for why you're having single motherhood. But the real core issue here is that we must also look at our population as we are growing and seeing that we are having enough to be able to feed that population. And I think that is where wealth creation is critical. I think that's what Bola Ahmed Tinubu, our president, has promised us. And I think they are working toward all that.
Okay, we'll look more into what President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has promised after this break. Just stay tuned.
thank you for staying tuned to Early Exchange on Soak News. Okay, just yesterday, the president revealed his 8-point agenda for this new administration, courtesy the finance minister and the coordinating minister for the economy, Wale Edu. And notable of all these are the 8 agendas, which are food security, ending poverty, economic growth and job creation, access to capital, improving security, improving the playing field, and rule of law, and fighting corruption. Yes, we've heard this before. Somebody once said that agendas are the same from government to government. Maybe they just come in different words and different, nomenclature, as the case may be. But this is Tinubu's 8-point agenda, and he has promised his body language and the charges he gave the ministers as being to be bold, to be courageous, and to come up with meaningful policies that can drive his agenda. And so we're looking at the 8-point agenda of President Tinubu, even as he approaches the first 100 days in office. And Idausa Osamaze is right beside me to take a look at this. Now, Idausa, the talk is, do we even need an 8-point agenda? Some will say, why not just have 1-point agenda, which is to get better as a country?
Well, media has a way of giving meanings to words. And I think what is reeled out is not different from what the president has been saying all through his campaign, even through his inauguration speech. And for me, is his understanding of the fundamental of the challenge that we all face today. That when we're talking about food security, we're talking about issues to say how do we feed our people, such that when there are natural emergencies that we don't run out of food, and even if there is a global issues that we are still able to have food to eat, because that's also critical. And you have seen that, of course, a lot of people also get into crime because hunger is also a motivation, because every human has this self-defense instinct that when you are pushed to the wall and you want to find how to survive, the survival instinct in man will always want some people to take to enemies to survive, as it were. So making food available for people, I think, is something that he has spoken to. And that was why, when, of course, he was talking about the revised issues on the palliative, and he said one of the things that he was going to do was to create some agriculture hubs where people can have some mechanized farming, where state is going to partner with some private farmers, big-time farmers, to ensure that there is adequate food on the poor man's table. Because the only reason why Ayo is sitting down here is to be able to get a 3 square meal. Yes. So the food has to be on the table, and that's one of the agenda that the president needs to guarantee, that everybody had good food to eat. And you want to see that the economy is robust. Now, there are a whole lot of things that is making the economy to stagnate, and some of them are stemming from government policies, and especially the fiscal policies of government. And you see, of course, the government has inaugurated a committee to look at the tax policy in Nigeria and see how to harmonize and synchronize the policies such a way that, of course, too much burden is not placed on businesses, and the businesses are allowed to breathe. Because it's only when businesses breathe that the poor can actually breathe. Now, you see, these are the issues. Now, there are also issues that have to do with security, of course, which, of course, a lot of people argue that people can't go to farm because of insecurity. Now, you cannot actually create an environment that will be friendly for people to come and put investment on your ground without providing security for those investments. Now, if I'm going to put money and say I'm bringing somebody to come and invest in Nigeria, I should be able to assure that person that your investment is safe. I'm going to assure that person that, of course, there will be no disruption from locals and all these things. So the government has a responsibility to put all these things in place. And so what we're talking here, or calling 8th agenda, is the governance approach of this new regime. That this is what we're going to look into to see how to oil the wheel of the economy so that it all flourish. And this is one of the issues for me, which is very, very heartening, The only item here that, of course, which the president has not spoken to, whether in the manifesto, was the fact that the people say, oh, he has never talked about corruption. Probably that is why the idea of corruption is coming in. But I know that when you are looking at corruption, it's really not going into the swamp to fight alligator. I've always talked about
draining the swamp.
And what this means for me is that the president put structure in place so that Nigeria can go full-blown e-governance. Our procurement process will be e-procurement so that there will be little human interference in the operations of government policies. Now, once we can achieve that and remove, the corruption will die naturally. The real reason corruption succeeds is that we have rejected e-governance for a very long time. People don't want to go on enterprise solutions. People just still want to do the normal thing so that you have to continue to clarify and then continue to seek rent and patronage from people who come for government services. Now, once these things are on a click of a button and everybody can access it and everybody has a fair chance, and of course, artificial intelligence is determining who gets what, when and how, there will be sanity in the system. Now, that will drive motivation for people to pursue either interest in education, vocational study, because they know that you don't have to know anybody to be able to get any office. And once we can reach that level, a whole lot of sanity will come into the system and the economy will be robust.
Okay, you just talked about the agenda that President Bola Tinubu has for Nigeria, at least for the next 4 years. But as we approach the first 100 days of his administration, let's look at those agendas. How many of them have we seen to a good extent the work done in them? For food security, we know the government has plans, but let's look at job creation, which is one of the agenda. This current administration plans to create 1 million jobs in the digital economy. Now, to that end, how much of work have we seen on ground to ensure this happens in the next 4 years? We're getting close to 100 days of his administration. Let's do some assessment here.
Well, I have always argued that it's not the place of government really to create jobs. What government does everywhere in the world is create an enabling environment that will be conducive for private sector to blossom. And as private sectors are blossoming, you will see jobs being created. Because naturally, where you have good government in place and businesses are running, of course, not many people will want to see government jobs, want to take even government job as it were. Because what we have right now is that we can't even pay those ones who work well. And that's one of the reasons a lot of people argue for issues that has to do with patronage and corruption or rent seeking within the system, because the pay is small and it cannot actually take people home. Now, if government can't even pay its worker, we're borrowing to pay salaries, and I don't think it's the place of government to actually, and I think what government is speaking to is that this is what government is saying, we're going to partner with the organized private sector, and the regime has made this very clear. Now, what's this level of partnership? He talks about this ICT partnership to create ICT hubs. Maybe replicating now what we have in the Yaba ICT hub, in the 6 geopolitical space. Massive job will come from there. Because as you empower these people, then you see that they will be able to also employ people. You also think of industrialization. Take, for example, you go to Aba region, and you are having a lot of companies being empowered to produce things locally. We're looking at the CNG-driven cars being empowered and supported by government to be able to get people in. All these things will boost employment opportunity in the country. But I'm not thinking that the government is thinking of hiring more civil servants, because that's not where we should be. Yes, of course, maybe within the police or the military sector, where, of course, more hand will be needed to provide adequate security and protection for lives and properties, that may be done. But, of course, before we even get to that route, we have to, first of all, incentivize those who are already working. so that we can also attract good hands to come into that sector. But I think that using this 100 days kind of analysis for me is really neither here or there, because government is not 100 days. A government is a budget life cycle. And so this budget is already running, and the government inherited the budget. So there is little or nothing the government can actually do with an existing budget that is already running. So if we have to assess this government, we have to assess them based on its own budget, whose preparation has begun and probably will be passed in December. And then we will now be seeing what is going to be the item on the budget, what is government promising, and what are substantive action that government will need to take to ensure that they get to their goal. And I think that would be what would be fair to the regime.
All right. Let me just look at the minister's, speech. Two segments there. One, he said, and I quote, "We met a bad economy, and the promise of Mr. President is to make it better." They want to skip a particular process. Good. From bad to good to better should be the order of the day. Yeah. This is very ambitious, some people will say. Then there comes the question of funding. Where will they get the funding from? Because he said here also that the present administration will not rely on borrowing as he had pledged. He, now referring to Mr. President, to be transparent, honest, and accountable to other people. So if they are not relying on borrowing, of course, there are tax options for them. What other areas are they looking at to, get the funding they need to, execute all these developmental ideas and legs of his administration, if they are not borrowing?
Yeah, there's no doubt that, of course, they inherited a bad system. And it's just that sometimes we are not fair to those who govern us. Sometimes I sit down and I ask myself some very basic questions. Now, if you remember, since 2014, October 2014, when the cost of oil dipped, we went into a recession. And as at 2015 May, where the new government was being sworn in, many states in this country, the records are there. Over 29 states could not pay civil servant salary. And the burden of that regime was to see how to bail out states to be able to pay salaries of their workers. And we seem to have overcome that. While we were thinking that problem was getting over, nobody expected COVID. COVID came. The whole world was shut down for 6 months. And how did government run 6 months without revenue? In short, the prices of the crude was on the negative because, of course, we were paying demurrage on the sea, on the vessels that were on the sea. Now, these were real issues. We're not looking at those issues. Nobody is talking about them because they were natural issues. They were not man-made. And then all of a sudden, we thought that COVID was over. Then the pressure came from Russia-Ukraine war, which is putting pressure on grain and movement and all these things that has created a whole lot of crisis globally. Now, all these things are not man-made. They are not Nigerian produced. So these are the issues that we are dealing with as a people. Now, if we have to deal with these issues and we have to be objective about them, and I think people must realize that government inherited they were unlucky, so to speak. And now, what do you need to do is see, how do we plan for a future? So what government is saying is, I don't want to borrow. And that was why Mr. President, on the day of his inauguration, he said, subsidy is gone. There's no money, so I won't borrow to buy fuel for anybody. It's not going to happen. And I think that's the same thing that the minister is re-echoing. Now, what we are looking at is to see, how do we block the loopholes where funds are draining? How do we cut down on the cost of governance? We heard the president said yesterday that, look, people who are not meant to go to the United Nations General Assembly, they should not go. In other words, only officials of government that have business with that assembly should be in that meeting. Family, friends should not be on that entourage, so that the cost will go down for government. And I think if more of all these things are done, cost-costing measures are taken, we will see that some revenue will be freed up. Already we are seeing some freed up because of the subsidy removal. And of course, the last speech of the president to the nation, he told us that at least we have not been able to spend over almost $1 trillion for fuel subsidy in the last 1 month. So these are the gains that you're going to get. Block up the loophole where these funds are draining, and then see how much you can actually muster to execute this particular budget until its life cycle in December 31st. And then you can now think of planning your own budget to run for 2024. And that's why I said that for an objective assessment of what the president will be able to do, he will be assessed based on his own budget, which is the 2024 budget, not 100 days in office.
Okay. Now, still looking at the government not wanting to borrow to get funds, the question still lies on where would the government get revenue from? Agreed, subsidy has been removed, but would that be sufficient to run the economy? And if it's not going to be sufficient, maybe the government is looking at taxing. How would that impact the businesses? Because part of the plan is to improve playing field on which people and particularly businesses can operate. So taxation is one thing that we've known over the years has been a problem for businesses. So how is the government going to navigate this, the issue of funding?
Yeah, maybe I didn't make it very plain, and I said in terms of government widening the tax net. Because if you look at the tax to GDP in Nigeria, it's the smallest almost everywhere in the world. So if you look at the 200 million people and the number of people who are taxable, you will see is the smallest globally. A lot of people who play in the informal sector are not captured by their tax net. They are making some big money, but they are not taxed because they are not running formal structures. So these are issues, and this is what we're saying, that once you tidy up the entire system and you block where revenues are leaking, government will make more money. And don't forget that, of course, the president has also given a matching order to NNPCL that no more swap of our crude. What that means is that we will sell our crude, and we are going to make revenue coming from crude. Now, the operations of the Nigerian customs, for example, had also to be improved because, of course, and I think kudos to customs because they have actually digitized their process of clearing. The revenue is coming in through the crude, through the customs. We are not mixing it. And of course, it's coming into the COFA. So if government can account for its revenue, even the one that is coming in through the school system, of course, you see there's some increase in school system, which of course is also to cushion some of the effects on running the schools. Now, once we can aggregate all this together, there will be revenue in the interim to drive this process. And once government is able to actually set things in place, for example, the agriculture start to run. Take for example, if you plant rice today, it takes 3 months for harvest. If you plant corn, it takes 3 months for harvest. So which means in the next 3 months, if we can put money in these critical sectors and actually mechanize them, we can actually begin to see their reward if they are done well.
Okay. Now, one other sector that is critical to the Nigerian economy is the health sector. But when people think about the health sector, most of the times, they think of it as a cost-draining sector. But then the Coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare, Ali Pate, said that they will look at the critical sectors, sections of the health value chain, the health value chain. People think about, health in the context of doctors and nurses. But then within that, in between those two poles of the medical practice are a lot of, professionals there who constitute part of the health sector chain. He said they will look at that value chain and they will exploit the chain to improve the economy and create jobs for the people. Could you please speak more to this?
Well, I think when you actually look at the reason why a lot of people go to seek medicals abroad, it's not really because of doctors. They go to seek medical abroad because of diagnostics, which of course we have not done really excellent well in that region. Now, if you don't put so much money on diagnostics, a lot of people, of course, you have, I remember some years ago, one of church members had a problem. And then, of course, it was in Igbobi, and they thought that it was a bone problem. Until they take him to London, they could not discover that it was actually cancer because we couldn't diagnose them. a lot of people are dying of avoidable death. And so the real reason why there are medical tourism, so to speak, that people are moving out of this place and they are going abroad to go seek this thing is because the diagnostic system, we have not been able to actually invest so much in it. Now, if you exploit that, of course, that people can actually know that you do diagnosis here and you get good results. I even had cases where people have to send, where samples are sent today from Nigeria to South Africa for analysis. Some are sent to India. So all these issues have not been actually looked at closely. Now, if we put energy in this area, of course, our doctors are not short of knowledge to prescribe. But for them to do a proper prescription, the proper diagnosis had also to be done. Now, there's also another dimension of medicine, which is preventive medicine. We have also not invested in a whole lot of enlightenment that people know there are some certain things that they can do so that they don't get sick, and pressure is not on the health sector. That's an industry on its own. Now, some years ago, in the UAE, they discovered that, look, children were becoming obese. And it was costing government money to deal with obesity. Now they have to introduce into their curriculum nutrition as a course.
Wow. As
preventive medicine. Now, these are issues that, of course, you need to focus on. Now, if people are not sick, you won't spend more money treating. We won't be focusing on curative. So, there's also an industry around that we should also have to focus on to see how do we prevent people from being sick. Now, once you are able to look at these value chains in terms of health delivery, then you will have a good health system, and then you will be able to cope with the pressure that comes from those who will fall sick, because naturally aging and the rest of it will also always lead people to be sick, and then there will not be so much pressure on the system because a lot will be coming. And if we do that well, who says that people from our neighboring country won't come to Nigeria to also seek assistance, as we currently do to South Africa and to India and to Europe?
Okay, now saying that we have a very youthful population, the Minister for Health and Social Welfare said that the President envisions the idea of harnessing human capital for the youth population. Now, I know that one area the President is looking at is that of harnessing the youthful population towards the growth of the digital economy. But what other area can the government consider or should go hand in hand? Because again, we know that technology is the way to go, but not everybody can be techie.
Yeah, but see, these are part of the issues, and that is what government is need to also take on very, very critically. Now, what most nations have done in time past to be able to really engage people to work is, of course, infrastructure development. And this is also a huge employer of labor. Because as long as you are building infrastructure, you see, for example, around surveying, around engineering, around building, a whole lot of economy will be developed. Now, we're also having issues not able to engage people, because it's not just the engineers who are going to be on site that will be the people. Those who are selling building materials will be making profit. Now, if that industry is expanding, for example, now those who are making cement, they will be employing more hands to be able to meet up with the market demand, because you are building infrastructure and you are investing wholly on infrastructure. Now, what this will mean is that people begin now to learn and develop competencies in these areas. And as they are growing their competencies in this area, then, of course, they are also being engaged. And then the economy, of course, and the redistribution of wealth is going around. And like the president has promised, he can actually put an end to poverty. Now, I keep referring to my second Bible, which is The Wealth of Nations by Ray Dalio. Now, once you can increase the level of knowledge of a people, their productivity will skyrocket. And as productivity increases, prosperity will come. So I think that's the area where we should be looking at. Let's have quality education. which is critical. And I'm also hoping that the Minister of Education should speak to these issues. Because we're having so many people who go to school really and they are not really well educated. Because they are in school to pass exam. And I think Nigeria must transition from merely passing exams to be able to actually apply whatever course they read, and then they use it usefully. I remember some months back, and I was saying to my son, you see, all the people producing cream, all the people, principles for producing soap, they are all chemistry, elementary chemistry. So how do we transition from just teaching our children chemistry in the secondary school to really actually empowering them that they can actually grow business out of chemistry, out of physics, even without being to the university? Now, I think this is where the educational system really needs to become real functional so that we can engage the youth and allow them to actually express themselves in terms of creativity. Another issue that, of course, the school system must deal with is that, you see, in Nigeria, many of our professors believe that students cannot contribute to knowledge until they become PhD. That's an error. And so, if you don't write what the lecturer gives to you in class, you are not sure to pass. There's no one way to eternity. There are multiple ways. So, we should also allow children to express themselves, to challenge old assumptions. And as we challenge the other assumptions, you will see that, of course, creative energy will be stirred up. Innovation becomes the order of the day, and then, of course, prosperity will follow.
Okay. Now, to achieve all this, there is need for stability in the macroeconomic environment of the country, because these things are not in isolation. I like your analogy of, not analogy, your submission on, making education functional, where people, to be sincere, to agree with you, all these things are elementary chemistry, saponification. From secondary school, you can produce soap, getting locally made materials. Now, but it's not happening because schools are not teaching us to be entrepreneurial at that particular age in life. But then let's leave the school system and let's leave the Minister of Education alone now. How does the present administration ensure a stable macroeconomic environment? Talk about inflation, talk about exchange rate, and so on and so on. Of course, we've seen steps in that direction, but maybe you should just speak more to this. What should they look at to ensure that we have that stable macroeconomic environment that can, attract investors, both from outside and even from within, to play?
I think those issues are already also spoken to by the 8-point agenda, as you see. Now, let me point your attention to one of the issues that is raised on that. Now, what are the real basic issues that are fueling inflation, for example? In Nigeria, as we speak, the real thing that is fueling inflation is commodity, food. That's what is fueling inflation. Now, what's the problem with food? Is it that we are not producing enough, which of course the law of demand and supply, or issues that have to also do with logistics that are responsible for fueling inflation in that regard? Now, this is a problem. How do we solve it? And that's what government is doing, food security. So if we have enough food, what will happen to inflation? It will go down. Now, you're talking about interest rate, for example. Why are the interest rates very high? Now, people are talking about the cost of procuring capital. And recently, government really needs to look at commercial bank. We remember some years ago when Soludo came as our CBN, where he told that every bank should capitalize with about 25 billion. Are all the banks operating in Nigeria duly capitalized? CBN need to look at that. Because if you have 25 billion as a bank, and you are not able to do business without 25 billion, and you are still talking about the cost of capital yourself, then there's a problem somewhere. So all those things are what government will need to clean up. And I think that the regime is looking at those issues because they know how these things work. That if banks are well capitalized, and then of course, because the only way banks make money is when you give loan to people and you recover the loan. And if you have an environment that, of course, the energy for productivity is steered up, people want to do business and they can get easy access to capital. And that was what the president spoke to on the 8-point agenda. That one, what fuels corruption is access to capital. Why people are not productive, they don't have access to capital. Now, once we can democratize that space, that people are having genuine assets to capital, what you will find is that these macroeconomic challenges that you are speaking to will be squarely taken care of.
All right, now the finance minister and coordinating minister for the economy, Wale Edun, has said that the president has given marching orders to ministers to roll out policies and programs within weeks to turn around the economy. So bringing that to, in line with the 8-point agenda, what would be the role of the ministers since they've given an order to make policies? What kind of policies should they be making now?
Well, you see, I think that's a natural thing to do because when you look at the leadership school, there's this thing they speak about, leaders' right strategy. And to say, this is the vision, this is where we're going to. Now, it is the role and responsibility of the managers to put one and one together to see how we can get to that point. The president has said he wants the GDP to grow at 6%. Now, the Ministry of Health will say, look, what is my contribution to the 6%? The Ministry of Solid Mineral will come and say, how do I contribute to this 6%? The Ministry of Agriculture will say, oh, how much is my percentage that will come to make this 6%? Now, they should be able to sit down and look at where values are going to come from and put a plan on the table. What is their own contribution to the 6% GDP growth? Now, if you look at, for example, just the solid mineral, and enough policies are made in there to clean up that space also, they can actually contribute up to 1% to GDP. And I think this is what it is. So, President is asking his managers now, draw up your KPIs, the things we are going to appraise you with at the end of the day. And that was why Anjiru told us the other day and said, of course, President Tinubu is not afraid to sack anybody. Because if you are not measuring up, then you don't have any business occupying any space in the ESCO chambers. So everybody now have to prove themselves. That's okay, I can contribute. Otherwise, then they bring in somebody else who can do better and make these things work. Now he's saying, you go back, go and draw a plan and tell us how you can help us achieve our goal, which is what every leader will do. And I think that is a step in the right directions.
The message is clear. You either step up or you step out or step down, as the case may be. We will take a very short break now. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation, the last lap of it with Mr. Idahosa or Sam Manse, who has been doing a clinical analysis of the economy of Nigeria and what the present regime has to do to move from bad to better, skipping the good in between. Don't go anywhere, we'll be back.
Great team must have people that have character, the first C, competence, the second C, and commitment, the third C. In an earlier impact, I shared the 5 forces of transformation being vision, team, time, resources, and resolve. And we had agreed that the one that we could do something about effectively and quickly is the team, making sure, in essence, that we have the right people on the bus and we have the right people sitting on the right seat in the bus. What are the considerations of selecting a winning team? In my view, there are 3 critical C's that must come into play for every member of a winning team. And the first C is character. It's important that we have common values, all the members of the team, to reduce friction. Where do we draw the line in the sand? What will we do according to our moral compass, and what will we not do? What are the behaviors that lead to the values we have professed? Character. So every member of the team must have above board character. The second C is competence. This is mainly the rigor of your logic, knowing everything about your area. A lot of times, and more often than not, we do have that rigor of logic. It's usually our communication of our logic that is faulty. The last one, but not the least, is commitment. During the era of COVID, when we pivoted to online work, lots of people got, 1, distracted, or 2, trying to do 2 things at the same time. So they are not working for only one project or one company. I mean, even if you are freelance, when you are on a project, you face that project squarely. When you don't have that commitment as a team member, you breach trust and you cause the team to have a common breach of trust, which causes friction. People want to feel that you've got my back and I've got your back. And when they don't feel that, then everybody leaves the load. So a great team must have people that have character, first C, competence, the second C, and commitment.
All right, thank you for staying tuned to Early Exchange on Soap News. We're still x-raying the economic blueprint of the present administration with special emphasis on the 8-point agenda that was reeled out yesterday by the Minister of Finance and the Coordinating Minister for the Economy, Wale Edo. And we've been speaking with Idahusa or Samanze, who has been x-raying this particular sector for us. Let me just ask you on the very last note before we move to something else on the show today. They mentioned the idea of access to capital, and we know how vital this is for promoting investment, for trade, and for commerce in the country. Yes, in your submission, you mentioned high interest rates and things like that as the barriers to access to this capital. What more is wrong with access to capital, and what should we be looking at if we really are serious about moving from bad to better?
Well, I think for me, apart from the fact that there's also a high interest rate, also to be also fair to the bankers, is also the risk of recovering loan is also a big challenge here. And this is all coming from the fact that you see so many loans that are given that are not performing. And there, of course, you lose shareholders' fund. Again, it's also to see how we can also create, like you said, that entrepreneurial spirit in people. tell people how to run business, how to run a business plan, what a cash flow look like, how to keep business books so that you can separate capital from profit. Because most people, they eat capital and profit at the same time because they think that everything that is sold in a day is all profit. So people have to be taught genuinely, how to do business. And these are all interconnected. Because once people know that you have to make profit and then you have to pay back, you have an obligation to pay back interest to the bank, and they're doing so, then of course the risk is lowered. The interest rate itself can also be lowered. And I think this is what we should be speaking toward. But yes, of course, he has given us a broad-based, let me call it a big picture of what they want to do. But we need to see the ABC and the 1, 2, 3 of his assets. What exactly is the policy that the government is going to put in place? Right now, we know that, of course, CBN fixes what the rate of interest is. Are they going to lower it to 1 digit? Nigerians want to know. And then we have the right to be informed that, yes, going forward, government has put the right measures and metrics in place so that commercial bank can lend and be competitive and ensure that the shareholders' fund is not sinking. Government need to also partner with these commercial banks on some certain key area of investment where they actually can also source revenue and resources so that the capitalized fund is not depleting, but rather is increasing. So these are all the areas and all the bottlenecks that have to be removed by the CBN so that the banks can run freely and then truly become very, very competitive. But above all, we must also find a way to also engineer a cooperative culture in Nigeria where people can function as cooperatives and they can hold themselves accountable, especially if the cooperative eventually become the collateral for loans and not physical buildings or assets.
Here, I was going to ask that how can the banks strategically handle the issue of bad loans? But you just mentioned cooperatives. Where cooperatives don't work or an individual does not belong to cooperative, are there ways to reduce the cases of bad loans, which is a discouragement to the banks lending to more people?
Yeah, but it's just a culture we need to grow of doing business well. That's what I've said. Because loan will always get bad if people have a very poor culture to productivity. Now, what you should do is that apart from actually giving people loan, and I think that there's also should be some follow-up, and I think some microfinance banks does that, to be able to follow up to see that, number one, the people who are doing the business are following their own books. They are keeping with rules. That from time to time, you are not waiting until maturity date to come at your people. Sometimes you need to follow up on them to be sure that they are doing the right thing and the funds are not seeking. And I think it will do more good if we follow up with people who have done than just waiting for them and until default, then we will be looking at collateral to take advantage of. I think that's the real issue. Okay,
so maybe there's something the commercial banks can now learn from the microfinance banks, as it's sometimes saying that it's the microfinance bank because they're smaller that learns from the commercial banks. So if they succeeded in that aspect, so why not? The commercial banks can learn that to reduce the cases of bad loans. Thank you very much, Dausa Osamanze, for being with us for a significant part of the show today.
Always my pleasure.
All right, we'll look at health. We talked about health today at the introduction of the show. That's going to form part of the focus of the show today. Let's look at innovative approaches in healthcare delivery. Now, as the world is evolving, changes are happening in different aspects of life. Healthcare is not left out. There are different changes that have happened in terms of the strategies and technologies that healthcare practitioners employ in delivering healthcare. There are universal approaches that have changed. Let's look at Nigeria. How much of that are we complying to? How much of innovative approaches do we now have in Nigeria that is improving the delivery of healthcare services to people? We'll talk more about this after this break. All right, thank you for staying tuned. Let's talk about health because health is wealth. It takes a healthy person to be productive. So, talking about innovative approaches to healthcare delivery. For instance, we have telemedicine and telehealth, which is a remote medical consultation and care via technology. This is a universal innovative approach towards healthcare delivery, where we're saying that a doctor, for instance, in the US can oversee a medical procedure in Nigeria via technology. It can give instructions, it can tell what to do, and can even consult, a patient can consult a doctor in that way. So that's one of the innovative approaches that we've seen in healthcare delivery in recent time. Now, this saves time and this gives access to people who perhaps would have needed to travel to the location of that expert to access his wealth of knowledge and expertise in that area. But with telemedicine, that gap, that distance was making to happen, that gap has been closed. So let's talk to Dr. Emeka Onwune, who is CEO of Swift Medics Healthcare, and see how much of telemedicine and other innovative approaches we're practicing in Nigeria in compliance with universal innovative approaches towards healthcare delivery. Good morning, doctor. Please unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Oh, absolutely. Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
I'm
And
so
you?
glad to have me here.
We're
Amazing.
glad to have you
So good
here
to have
too.
you here this morning. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We want you to talk to us about innovative approaches in healthcare delivery universally. Can you talk to us about some of them and let's know where we are in those innovative approaches in Nigeria? I've mentioned telemedicine. Let's begin from there.
Okay. Regarding innovative ways of approaching healthcare delivery, I would say technology has really done a lot in facilitating that, especially through telemedicine and telehealth, through social media, spreading health awareness online and, the likes. So I would say technology has really facilitated that to improve, awareness because first of all, we have to deal with a lot of barriers in our African cultural settings. When we talk about cultural beliefs, we talk about religious beliefs and the likes. So I would say technology and telemedicine has really helped, advance that. Currently, we're not there, but I would say we're in the process. I mean, there are a lot of new adaptations currently. We check out like the numbers of the way influencers are really doing great numbers with spreading comedy. So in the likes, a lot of people try to also spread health awareness, through the social media. I'm sure a lot of people are aware of someone called Apropos Doctor, who similarly does that constantly with social media. So I would say, first of all, the education gap is really, it's really wide currently. So right now, a lot of companies are trying to create that awareness on the importance and, how technology has really advanced. Because if we decide to, continue using the old ways of approaching things, definitely people that are using technology will be way ahead of their time and, will definitely make those other people in business obsolete. So I would say technology is here to stay, and we just have to figure out the best ways to tap into different forms of technologies and tailor it to our own ecosystem. Yeah. So I mean, like abroad and most Western countries have been adopting these processes like for a very long time, which we are slowly hopping on. And I'm sure like with time, more people will get used to it. And yeah, I also wanted to just correct a little notion there. The goal of telemedicine and all of this is not to replace the traditional medicine, but just to, complement what is going on. Yeah, precisely.
Okay.
Hope
Thank you
that
for that
answers
opener.
that question.
Okay, thank you for that opener. One other development in the area of innovative approach to healthcare delivery is the use of mobile health apps. How much of that adoption goes on in Africa here, and how can we tailor it to the peculiar needs of our own health challenges as Africans? Mobile health apps.
Okay, mobile health apps have really helped, to track a lot of things, store data, especially like, for instance, women have their monthly their monthly periods. So there are apps that help you track your the flow to determine, safe periods and to determine when, the visitor is coming next. We also have like apps that help you track your fitness goals, like also like the external wearable devices like smartwatches, Apple Watches, and the likes. They help you track your fitness. They also help you check your pulse rates. They help you check your various vital signs, and these are all stored in your health records online somewhere. So health apps, apart from that, other health apps that help you, store information, help you track your fitness, help you track your diets, help you keep records of your health, where when you have your next appointment, you're able to, bring out everything stored together in one file, not that you have everything jumbled up in different pieces of papers or different books. So this really helps you know organize your health information together. Apart from that, in recent times, apps that help you connect with a doctor from anywhere you are, 24 hours uninterrupted. Just like the way you pick up your phone and you order groceries online and all of that. That's the same way, like or order Uber. That's the same way, like lately you're able to seamlessly order or book a doc to speak to a doctor. So most of these apps have made communication and access to medical services easier. Recently, I saw someone was trying to order an ambulance because of an emergency, and they had no access to that. But these days, I'm sure once you like, um, just certain apps that make access to this kind of services easy. You're able to easily just pick up your phone and order an ambulance or whatever medical services you need. And apart from that, it has really helped the challenge of private one-on-one consultations because, for instance, like I said, some of the cultural barriers we have in Nigeria has to do with like spouses, the wife having to submit to her husband and all of that, not having privacy. Sometimes, the wife and husband will go to the doctor's office together, and wife might not be so free to like express herself. But when you have that private one-on-one consultation, she knows that she's at home and she can, speak to her doctor privately and, say all the concerns she has. Um, it creates that privacy, especially these days, even with the rising cost of fuel in our country. So it really eliminates all the stress of having to move from one place to the other and not being sure of the quality of service because most of these telemedicine platforms that are registered are handled by licensed medical practitioners. So I also advise to make sure before patronizing anyone, make sure you do your own little research to confirm that they are all registered duly with licensed bodies, because that's very important. A lot of people on the internet, sometimes it's hard to verify, who is legit or not. There's a lot of people front where they're not. So it's good to do a little background check and make sure you're patronizing the right people. I would say, like I said, the idea of the whole system is to complement what already exists and not to replace. Like you said, a doctor can be in a foreign country and performing a procedure in a different country due to like the strong internet, 5G access, and all of that. So I would say it's a combination of various factors, but I would say it keeps getting better, and we're open to harnessing this idea and maximizing it to our own advantage. Yeah.
All right, now let's take a look at e-health and health information systems, the use of digital records and online platforms for healthcare management. I know that the Lagos State General Hospital makes use of that, but how much of that are we using nationally in terms for healthcare management, and how does it improve healthcare delivery?
Oh, yes. Trust me, the central data really helps a lot because in the old traditional ways, you have to, use papers and books, and sometimes those are exposed to various risks of destruction. They could get missing. A lot of issues are arising with that. But with the central data, it really helps with continuity of treatment, where if someone has their health records, even if they're going to another country, they could get treatment there where the doctor there requests this medical data. And thanks to new cybersecurity expertise lately that have helped, to encrypt this data and have them securely stored, with, various security codes to access them from the other end. Because this health information, if they leak, it can be very disastrous because they contain very personal information. So it's risky, but like I said, it's you have to do with the emerging new technology. There are also emerging ways where people are trying to hack your data and the likes, just to spoil your business. But so with the new innovative emerging um, ways of trying to hack, we also have engineers trying to, develop ways of securing this data. And this data collaboratively, when properly collected and analyzed, it can actually help, to determine future health trends, set, new, create researches and set new protocols for standardized treatments, standardized treatment protocols, which can be adopted by the government, individuals, private sectors, but in all to, improve the health outcome. Because, for instance, if, during a certain period, this is when this particular um, disease, or, that it really helps, track when epidemics happen, when pandemics happen. It helps track different trends and patterns in the healthcare industry. So this data is very, very important. Um, collecting data of your patients and storing in the cloud as well is very important. Like you mentioned earlier, we have a lot of, facilities adopting that this new technology way. Sometimes I wouldn't lie. Sometimes it looks like it is slow, but I would say because of, it's just something we're not used to. And I believe like, with time, people get to adopt to it, this technology, just like when, mobile phones came into the country. It wasn't that easy. It was difficult for everyone to even have a SIM card, and it was quite expensive, if you can recall. But nowadays, it's just easy. Everyone has a phone. Even a young child has a phone, tablet, access to internet. So I would say it's really evolving, and we're in Nigeria. We're picking on really fast, and I'm sure we're, in the process, and we're heading there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Now, you did mention the fact that data is very important, and diagnosis starts from data collection in a context. You get the vital signs, but then there is this talk of the reliability of some of these innovative approaches to gathering data for diagnosis. Let's take, for instance, the electronic sphygmomanometer that you people use to get blood pressure. I've seen cases where medical professionals, after having used these electronic forms of the sphig, still had to go back to the manual sphig because of what they call, electronic inconsistencies. I'd like you to speak to it. To what extent can we rely on some of these new, innovations in diagnosis?
All right. Yeah, it's very good you pointed that out. When we talk about wearable devices, we could talk about, smart watches that have sensors. We talk about even your pulse oximeter that, you put on your fingers when you're trying to get your oxygen saturation and your pulse in the hospital. We talk about different kind of, even a blood pressure machine as well. So I would say different wearable devices have their own advantages. And for instance, your wristwatch cannot tell your blood pressure. So you wouldn't expect your wristwatch to check your blood pressure, but it can accurately, to an extent, check your pulse rate and your oxygen saturation. But regarding the accuracy, I'll leave that to the researchers, because they definitely carry out various studies to, and they use various sample sizes and various parameters to measure this research, before it's introduced to the market. And obviously, I'm sure, for instance, when they check your pulse with your wristwatch, they definitely check with the pulse oximeter and check with other devices that can check at a way to see the reasons. And for a fact, there could be false positive, and different kinds of errors regarding wearable devices. Because I know for a fact when it comes to the pulse oximeter that we use on our fingers to check our pulse and oxygen saturation in the hospitals, sometimes it's naturally made for people with lower melanin. That's like, I'm talking about people that are very complexion, white people. So sometimes there could be some errors with that. To be honest, like I said, it has to do with like scientific and different kind of reasons in lab, which I'm not really fully knowledgeable about. But I know there have to be, protocols to introduce all of these devices into the market. And I'm sure researchers, with time, um, are doing their best to get better with that. Regarding the blood pressure, the automatic and the manual one, you understand what you mean. And to be honest, there could be other reasons that might not directly have to do with the machine reading. There could be reasons of, for instance, like the electronic blood pressure machines will need regular battery changes. They will need, certain, and even generally when you're checking your blood pressure, you need like specific, there's certain rules, that you have to um, take while checking someone's blood pressure. So if there's any reason for disparity in that, or is any of the protocols not fully, followed, there could be errors naturally. So, you have to make sure like the person is not you can't check your blood pressure over your clothes. Like, you won't give you the proper reading. Like, the machine has to be like, almost proportional to like the level of your heart. The batteries have to be changed regularly, and a lot more issues like that. So when these are not followed strictly, they can have errors. Yeah.
Okay, let's come to technology mainly now. Artificial intelligence, the use of robots for surgery, in assisting for surgery and other procedures. How far have we complied with that? And what are the issues if the compliance level is still very low?
Okay. So regarding robots and artificial intelligence, I would say like in general, we're still slowly adopting to the use of consulting with the doctor over the phone, and with the challenges of having to store data online, cybersecurity, and all of that. Regarding the artificial intelligence and robot assisted procedures, I wouldn't say we're there, but I would say there are a lot of investments in the health sector. A lot of healthcare startups have been raising funding um, to build that infrastructure. So even the use of chatbots to answer health related questions, just like we're also adopted on our platform on SweetMedics. So even when the customer service is absent, like the person is still able to ask health related questions and get answers to health related prompts. And the artificial intelligence, it continues to learn over time when people ask different questions, and when people contribute to the answers as well. So it kind of helps to pattern and analyze human behaviors, and in that way, it's able to predict some of these outcomes. So artificial intelligence, for sure. I don't see it as a competition with the natural or the traditional ways of we appreciate the medical field, whether it's telemedicine or in the traditional hospital setting. But I would say, because even after analyzing this data, the the artificial intelligence gives a vague, approach to it, while you need the human brain to tailor it to a particular situation, to be more appropriate and useful. So yeah,
Okay.
so that's my opinion on that.
All right, thank you very much. We're still speaking with Dr. Emeka Nwone, and he's been talking about innovative approaches in healthcare delivery. Let's take a breather and go on a very short break, and when we are back, we continue with the conversation. Please don't go anywhere.
How can I watch this online?
Thanks for staying tuned. It's still the discussion on health on early exchange. So we've been looking at the innovative approaches to healthcare management globally, and specifically also talked about how far Nigeria has moved in terms of innovative practices. But right now, let's look at some of the barriers to healthcare access in Nigeria as we continue the discussion with Dr. Uwune Emeka, who is the CEO of Swift Medics Healthcare. All right, doctor, let's look at some barriers that hinder access to healthcare delivery. We know that a range of them, there are very many. Can we have some of them? Please, can you unmute yourself?
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
Okay,
So
let's look at the barriers now.
Okay, I'll say first of all, availability of quality health infrastructure. Availability of quality doctors, because there's a lot of doctors are traveling abroad to look for more lucrative sources of income, as well as even doctors, trying to diversify to more specialized practices. Also, I would say, funding. Sometimes, it's not these days, like the economy hasn't been the best, so people are even struggling to eat. So less about take care of their health or take their health as priority. Now, I would also say education gap, because early education, health education from primary schools to religious institutions to public places to government places, it's very important. Even social media, it doesn't have to just take the influencers. It also boils down to people that care about their health, making sure they share the right information on social media. Some people are just quick to, send a broadcast message without even reading through. So it's very important to read through and make sure you're spreading the right information. So yeah, those are a few of the challenges regarding, the rising incidence of non-communicable diseases in younger generation. Before we used to think that you have to get to a certain age before you're hypertensive or have certain health conditions, but nowadays we notice like even younger people are coming down with such problems. Yeah, I think up the top, these are just a few of the challenges when it comes to the healthcare infrastructure. I would say also funding, access to quality healthcare, um, language barriers, cultural beliefs, because certain cultural religious beliefs, limit you to receiving certain type of medical treatments.
Okay. Now, you as the
Yeah.
CEO of Swift Medics, if I take the literal meaning of the word Swift, it means healthcare has to be accessible almost at the speed of, tapping a finger, if I got that right. But then we know that in some parts of Africa, geography is a problem, talking about rural areas, and that could, limit the access to quality health services. How can we, thank God we started with the place of innovation in healthcare delivery. How can technology essentially break the barrier of geography and give us swift access to, quality healthcare?
Okay. To be honest, healthcare is, no matter how much you want to tone it down, healthcare has to bear a cost. Healthcare cannot completely be free. But the idea of universal access to healthcare just means, not having to break your bank to access healthcare, means, having access to healthcare whenever you need it. So, to be honest, in those remote areas, they still need some kind of, funding in those regards, because when we talk about the health practitioners, they can do as much as doing community outreaches and you know partnering, because it has to do with a lot of collaborations from the government to non-governmental organizations to private individuals and just people that care, stakeholders, family members of people affected. You really has to do with that collaborative effort. And, like I said, community outreaches where, health practitioners go into communities that are underserved, and they are able to, provide healthcare for these people at least at no cost. Well, like I said, it still has to do with funding, because those health practitioners have to be compensated. The materials used have to be catered for. So it also takes like um, companies, organizations that are interested in community social responsibility initiatives to also implement that, because I know most big companies these days have those arms that take care of those aspects. And when it comes to the very remote areas in regards to telemedicine, they might not have access to internet to access medical care, just like like most telemedicine or telehealth platforms. And these days, I would say there have been new approaches to accessing healthcare from even places you don't have internet. With collaboration with telecommunication companies to create USSD codes where people that if they don't have smartphones, they're able to still access healthcare. And also, like you're mentioning earlier about wearable devices and remote medical procedures where a less skilled medical practitioner can be in a field and still have this beneficiaries access healthcare from anywhere. With the professionals can even be far away, and they still have access to medical care through technology and through telemedicine. So it really takes a collaborative effort and takes stakeholders, to identify these issues and, tailor it to communities, depending on the goal. I know for a fact, like in certain places in Nigeria have limitations to healthcare services because of so many factors. So I would say it just really has to do with being tailored to what the needs and requirements of that community has to be. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk more on preventive medicine, vaccination programs, campaigns, and maybe sensitization to increase people's awareness of certain diseases that overburden the healthcare system. What is the way to go about that?
Preventive health, definitely. To me, I preach and advocate for preventive health because I believe, prevention is better than cure. And when we talk about preventive health, we're talking about, ways that we can prevent these diseases from occurring in the first place. We're talking about ways that we can, prepare our bodies to fight for, ahead of these problems. We're talking about ways that we can boost our immunity and our immune system to fight for us. We're talking about ways that we can nourish our body, talking about ways that we can, improve our lifestyle, because lately, everyone a lot of people, get carried away from what they see on the internet. They see a lot of people, abuse alcohol, abuse cigarette smoking, and a lot of substance abuse, which have adverse effects on our health, when over a period of time. And, when we think about all these things, we think about ways that we can detox from these problems. We think of ways that we can, reduce or even completely stop these habits. We think about exercising and being active, because exercising can greatly help you prevent a lot of these problems. We're thinking about ways that, people can, because no matter what, stress will definitely come. We have to make money and we have to move around, especially in Lagos. So we have to just figure out ways to cope with this stress, to prevent it from having detrimental effect on us, like, even down to mental health problems, down to causing hypertension and various stress-related, even sleep disorders. Just ways that we can, really cope with these problems ahead of it now being like there, and we're trying to solve the problem. So preventive medicine just approaches ways that, you can prepare to greatly fight these problems even before they come on. So I'd say, what we eat, we have to consider what we put in our mouth, make sure we have, stay rehydrated, drink a lot of water regularly, eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, reduce processed foods, reduce fast foods, reduce oils, just various things that we feel that are harmful to us. Like a lot of people don't know what's harmful. So if I say things that we feel that are harmful, that might not be the right way to go about it. But we just need to eat more healthy and take care of our health more. Yeah, and we need to spread the right information, tell our neighbors, our family and friends the right thing to do when we have this information, because we can't just keep it to ourselves. If you're protecting yourself, it's good enough, but when you spread the information, you might be saving a lot of lives. So it's very important that we prepare our bodies to prevent these problems even before they exist.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about, educating the masses on what is good for them and what they should or shouldn't put into their mouth, with respect to, health procedures, one key barrier to assimilation of these new ideas is cultural insensitivity on the part of some of those who are into orthodox medicine. There is this friction with traditional medical practitioners who believe that before you people came on board, they had their own things working for them, and this can be a barrier. How should orthodox medical practice treat the tradomedical counterpart in such a way that will respect the cultural positions of them and limit friction to our entry? How should they collaborate?
Okay,
Or what can they do together?
So to get you right, did you say medical?
Yes, we know that we have the traditional medical practitioners in their own climes, in their own rural areas in particular, and then you want to do the norm, introduce them to new ways of doing things, and you experience some kind of barrier because of that cultural sensitivity. How can we still respect their culture, at the same time introduce the new ideas that we have brought to them without creating barrier for ourselves? That's the question I'm asking.
Okay, that's a very, very valid question. I would say it really takes collaboration, and it's quite technical, because whether we like it or not, these people exist. Like we said, we have the limitation of access to funds. So if people feel like they cannot afford healthcare in the hospital, to be honest, most people go to this traditional healers and community workers. That is why, like I said earlier, it takes collaboration between various stakeholders. We're not just talking about, the doctors in the hospital. We're talking about just other people. So it just really takes collaboration, honestly, because, sometimes even before they come to the hospital, maybe they might have gone to a few other places before getting to the hospital. So it's very important where there's that collaboration and understanding in the way we approach things. And that is why it's very important for any field to have standard of operations, where we have protocols of treatment and standards and guidelines that are strictly followed. So in that regards, and apart from that, when we talk about the cultural beliefs, for instance, there's some cultural or religious beliefs that we just can't eliminate, but I think with time we can just continue to emphasize the importance, because, for instance, some particular religious aspects or sects don't believe that you are meant to receive blood. Talking about blood transfusion, and we know that blood transfusion can greatly improve one's lives, like when needed. So those kind of barriers, even in case of emergencies, can really pose restrictions and limitations. So it just really takes we overseeing or overlooking barriers and coming together to collaborate. Having these discussions, having workshops and seminars where various stakeholders and healthcare individuals can come together, have conferences, after that network, and it also takes like governments to implement these policies
All
and
right.
everyone's seen how we can greatly
All
benefit
right,
from
thank you
them.
very
Yeah.
much, Dr. Emeka Awunde. We'll continue with you on the discussion after this break. Don't go anywhere. The discussion continues. Many thanks for being there. It's the early exchange on Sick News, and the discussion is on healthcare access. So before we went on the break, Dr. Emeka Owune was talking about coming to a collaboration between orthodox medicine practitioners and traditional medicine practitioners. So he's mentioned that some form of collaboration, maybe through seminars, through conferences, and even government policies can aid this. But I also know that sometimes it's about ego. Maybe in cases where some traditional practitioners have been able to, with their own medicine, attend to some health issues, maybe even cure them. So it now becomes a thing of, oh, we've handled this in the past, so there's nothing new that the orthodox medicine wants to bring aboard. But it should be about the best way, the most efficient way to save lives, and not really about ego. So collaboration really is needed in that area. Thank you for staying with us, Dr. Emeka Uni.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right. A while ago, when you were mentioning the barriers to healthcare access in Nigeria, you talked about availability of doctors. Now, in some other climes, they've introduced a kind of method where they have paramedics who stand in for cases that you don't necessarily need a doctor, or maybe for emergency cases before the patient is taken to see a doctor. Can we have more of that in Nigeria, maybe even in local areas, some people trained to stand the gap?
Well, yes, I would say, I think, for as far back as I remember, that has been, to be honest, happening. But I would say maybe not really consciously considered, because like since primary school, I've been seeing Red Cross, been seeing a lot of, Red Cross related organizations that are organized and, create these trainings. And I see a lot of HSC, Health and Safety of the Environment companies as well that provide those services where they train, even companies get those kind of trainings where they are trained on, basic life support and basic emergency, basic ways of attending to emergencies. They train staff and certain people, they train everyone, and they, especially train certain staff to help curb those kind of events in events of emergency. So those kind of trainings really help in controlling that aspect. Yeah, I'll say.
All right. Now, let me
Yeah,
just
I
ask
can't
if
really
there
remember the
is,
second part of the question.
okay, let me ask, in the legal profession, for those who can't afford, legal charges, we have the legal aid coming to their rescue. Do we have some kind of volunteer medical service rendering in this part of the world? Because that could go a long way in, addressing the challenge of barrier to quality healthcare delivery. I know that healthcare is very expensive, but do we have some kind of social interface, volunteerism in the healthcare sector, just as we have in the legal sector?
Honestly, we have no organized way of, of that in the medical sector. It's not official, but some hospitals, you create those kind of policies to help um, patients. Because I know there's one of the hospitals I worked in the past. I think it was in 2021. They had that kind of policy where, because obviously when people come to emergency, yeah, naturally they're meant to, make a deposit of certain amount of money. But there could be different barriers to making that deposit. Maybe the family member is not reachable at that time, or whatever case it might be. So the hospital came up with a policy where um, when anyone comes to the hospital and it looks like okay they can afford the services, but they cannot afford it at that time, but they're still trying to make um, like go through the process and get access to funds or whatnot. So they made a rule that okay, you could start with an emergency treatment and just try to stabilize the person in case of that emergency, where you could use up to like about 10,000 naira worth of materials. But once it's exhausted, it's there's nothing we really can do because it's a private hospital, and that helped for because at the end of the day, whether the person ends up paying the money or not, it's the hospital's loss. So the hospital just use that as a way of supporting the community, which I wouldn't say is the same for a lot of hospitals. So it really just has to do with you know those kind of situations. And apart from that, non-governmental organizations have really greatly helped with, helping people settle their medical bills in hospital and raising funds for people that, need to perform high cost medical procedures. So non-governmental organizations, just private people that really care about helping other people have also, really done a lot regarding that. And apart from that, there are also other private medical startups that provide loans and access to funds for people that need them. For people that have jobs that need those funds for healthcare. But those ones still obviously they still have to pay back, so it's like a loan to healthcare. But apart from this, the best of my knowledge, these are just a few areas I'm aware of that people access funds to healthcare.
Okay, let's look at partnerships. In what way would partnerships with global health institutions and organizations help with issues like funding, even supply of some medical equipment, drugs as well?
So that the collaborations with global organizations have really done a lot. There are a lot of global organizations that I make my research and I see what they're doing, and it's really commendable. A lot of organizations, especially people that are faced with chronic conditions, viral infections like HIV, hepatitis, tuberculosis, sickle cell. Some organizations help provide free drugs, free treatments, free medical clinics, um, even some kind of, insurance cover for some of these people. So I'd say those kind of funds and, this kind of support have really done greatly, especially for underserved communities. Like I mentioned earlier, with the economic situation of the country, a lot of people are not even able to, feed properly, talk less about buy medications for their health. It's not easy to advocate to people the importance of trying to be proactive towards their health. By the end of the day, it still has to do with one knowing the importance of taking care of your health, and this people, because these people coming to aid them, because like I said, these people, the people affected, they really don't, it's not like they don't care, or they just have more importance or more their pain points are different at this time to compare it with the healthcare system. So it just really takes people that care for them to help. Someone reached out to me, she saw someone that had a broken leg, got hit by a truck like 2 years ago. And she reached out to me and she's like, oh, please, how can we help this guy? Please, how can we, help him probably access a surgeon and all of that? We've been on that case for a while, but that guy has been on that street for a long time, and no one really cared about, trying to help that person. So like I said, it just really takes people that want to do it. You can't really force anybody. You tell someone, oh, let's try and do this for healthcare, let's try and do this. They tell you, man, they've not eaten. They'll tell you their own pain points. So it just really has to do with like people that are moved by it and people that really care, in all honesty.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emeka Owuni, the CEO, Swift Medics Healthcare, for being with us on Early Exchange, talking about healthcare access and universal coverage. We've looked at the innovative approaches to healthcare management. We've also looked at the barriers to accessing healthcare in Nigeria. We value your time with us today on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Had a good time.
Okay, we're glad to know that. All right, we'll go on a quick break and then we'll look at something different from health. It's a new development. Let's talk about that after this time.
Thank you for staying tuned to Early Exchange. We are on the last lap of the show for today. Just yesterday, it was in the news that the President, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has approved the appointment of a new board and management of the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC. Of course, we all know the vital roles that the NDDC is playing, and we know the challenges in the Niger Delta. So we want to just make a quick x-ray of the new appointment now, the implications for Nigeria as a whole, especially for the Niger Delta as one key area where our collective wealth also comes from, just as it comes from some other parts of the country. And to take a look at that is Sam Orowuche, who is Director of Policy, Research and Development for Femi Wash Limited, owners of Sook News and Watch Radio. Sam, good morning. Good to have you.
My pleasure to be here, Aya, and blessing.
I wouldn't want to. Okay, I wouldn't want to start by saying as the son of the soil, but then that would be a bit too direct on you. I've said it anyway. The Niger Delta, we know what it does. We know what it represents in our history, either of recent history or the very distant one. But then look at the reconstitution of the board of the NDDC. What is the significance of this to addressing the challenges of the Niger Delta? The new board now.
Thank you very much. Finally, a new board has been inaugurated for the Niger Delta Development Commission. But the core issues remain. Maybe as we progress, we'll be able to speak to some direct issues. But before we advance the conversation, it's important that the mandate of the NDDC was to provide some socioeconomic development for that region that produce a greater majority of the national wealth. But since 2000, when it was initiated by the Obasanjo regime, there has been a lot of challenges. So to what extent can this new board bring to bear the master plan for development of the Niger Delta remain to be seen. So maybe as we advance the conversation, we'll be able to speak to specific issues in the Niger Delta. And proudly, I'm from the Niger Delta.
That's what I said.
So I understand the key issues because my community back home is an oil-producing community. So I can speak to those issues directly.
Okay, the good news is that there is a new board, because I knew that before this new board was constituted, there have been a lot of back and forth with the constitution. Sometimes the board is said to be constituted only for announcement to be made that that board was dissolved, and then so it was really an issue that dragged. But coming to the role of the Niger Delta Development Commission, and like the name implies, it's supposed to be a development commission for the Niger Delta region of Nigeria, which is mainly the oil-producing area of Nigeria. Looking at the project of the NDDC, how much of developmental activity have we seen in their work?
Thank you very much indeed. If you look at the investment made into the NDDC and what you see on ground is a far cry from the developmental projects. So the politics of it is what has been challenging in the last 15 years. We talked about the forensic audit of the activities of the NDDC. Those reports are not in the public domain yet. We had some other projects like the fiber optics project that was done in 2015. That project was abandoned after spending billions of naira. You had other ones for youth empowerment and development. So by and large, if you look at the core mandate of the master plan of developing the Niger Delta vis-a-vis what that commission has done, remains to be seen whether the commission has met the aspiration of the Niger Delta people. But in spite of these challenges, we have a few projects that has been done in the Niger Delta, but they need to scale up those development in line with the master plan that was developed to bring the Niger Delta region to speed in line with other developmental agenda of the country.
Okay, in coming up with developmental agenda for the Niger Delta, there is talk in some quarters that maybe we need to factor in the genuine needs of the people by embarking on stakeholder engagement discussions. Yes, the NDDC is a body that is meant to represent the interests of the Niger Delta, but some are saying we should come down to the grassroots, because a board can only go as far as the knowledge that its members have in their head. How much of grassroots engagement do you think should be done to ensure that we genuinely address the actual needs, the biting needs of the Niger Delta as against the textbooks needs that we read about all the time?
Thank you very much. That's a great contribution from you. The point here is that I would suggest the bottom-up approach to development. So the new board that has just been announced yesterday by the president, so they must get back to work as quickly as possible. And this stakeholder engagement that you talked about must be a priority for this new board, so that the developmental needs of the various communities within the Niger Delta is coming from the people themselves, so that we can really see the actual development based on the existing master plan that was developed to bring that region up to speed in terms of development and projects.
So what measures will ensure transparency and accountability and even governance of the NDDC? Okay.
For accountability, once the people are involved in terms of the developmental needs of each of those communities, then there will be stakeholders in terms of from the planning, from the execution of those projects to when those projects are delivered. That will bring about co-accountability. So let the people own their project, let them be specific to the kind of projects they want for their communities. Then they should be accountability partners to the commission in terms of the deliverable that is expected from the commission, so that they can take full ownership of their projects within the communities.
Okay, now the issue of environmental sustainability in the Niger Delta is a very key one that has attracted not just local discussions but even foreign discussions on that. Every now and then we get to see videos, documentaries of the extent of damage that is done to the Niger Delta by the reason of exploration. This should be a front burner discussion as it has been in the past. Now, what exactly should this new governing board be looking at to address the issue of sustainable environmental practices in the Niger Delta?
All right, the United Nations Environment Program already has an initiative, particularly with the cleanup of the environment. The Ogoni cleanup that started since 2019, not much has been done. So the new board should work in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Environment, the United Nations Environment Program, to see how we can clean up the environment on a sustainable manner so that the ecosystems is not depleted as a result of exploitation and exploration of oil and gas in those regions. So it must be a collaborative effort, even from the community level. State government level should be involved so that they be more accountable in trying to protect the environment. And United Nations Environment Project must work in concert with the NDDC so that we can build our region in a sustainable manner and that the ecosystems are restored and the devastating effect of exploitation is reduced to the barest minimum.
Okay, when we look at the projects that the NDDC has executed in communities in the Niger Delta, it's either block of classrooms, maybe some small buildings here and there. But looking at the funds that go into the Niger Development Commission, what is the capacity of the NDDC? Because even when they want to engage or they have to engage with the community to have a need assessment done, people will only demand based on their knowledge of the capacity of the commission. What is the capacity of the NDDC? No,
within the framework that established the NDDC, I think the capacity is there. The politics in terms of how that place is run is what has been the major concern to the people of the Niger Delta. So the budgets and the money that are released, once they are tied to specific projects and the communities are able to take ownership of these projects and program, I'm sure development can come to the people. So the capacity is there, but the politics in terms of project delivery and the way projects are executed has been a major concern to the peoples of the Niger Delta. So the new chairman, Charles Ebie, who incidentally comes from Delta, must look at those challenges, particularly the forensic audit, and see how they can take that commission to another level and by bringing development to the people.
Okay, now let's just speak on the very last note from me here to the politics, because you mentioned that the capacity is there for the commission, but the politics of execution. I just took a cursory look at the list here. All of them appear to be sons of the soil, so to speak. Now, should the politics now be against them? Because whatever you do for the Niger Delta is for your own people. What should be the language we speak to their conscience to ensure that, yes, this politics, if it is played at all, is played in the favor of the Niger Delta, not in the favor of any individual member of this particular board? What should we speak to their conscience?
Well, it's a national commission. Incidentally, in terms of appointment, people from the 9 states, core states that produce oil form the board. But However, when you look at the national politics of it, there's been a problem. So what we need to do is that stakeholder engagement from the communities to hold their own people accountable in terms of the deliverable that they expect from them. Therefore, the new chairman must work with various communities to see the kind of projects they need, and they must execute the project in line with the expectation of the people of the Niger Delta.
Okay, so what would be the role of the NDDC towards youth, tackling the issue of youth restiveness in that region?
All right, they have various programs already. There was one that they did in 2019, and I'm sure that the new board should look at that and see how they can bring that to bear. They had a program for 200 youths in the Niger Delta in terms of training them in telecoms and other fiber technologies. They need to rework those projects so that people can benefit. So once the projects are well executed, then youth restiveness will be a thing of the past, because they will be meaningfully engaged in terms of those projects. They will act as contractors. They work with those schemes. Therefore, that restiveness will be reduced.
All right, thank you very much, Sam Rowoje, Director Policy, Research and Development, Femi Walsh Limited, owners of Sook News and Walsh Radio, for speaking, though we didn't have so much time to talk about it, speaking to the issues in the Niger Delta with respect to the newly constituted governing board. Thank you very much for coming on the show this morning.
My pleasure, thank you.
And that will be the size of the package this Wednesday, the midweek edition of Earliest Change. Tomorrow is yet another day. Don't forget at 10 a.m. today, Olaoluwa will be here on Business Insight. You want those insights that you need to flourish today, a new business day. Please stay tuned. My name is Ayo Jimmy. I am signing out at this point.
And to the newly constituted board of the NDDC, congratulations to you. The president expects that you ensure a new era of successful administration in line with his renewed hope agenda. So we wish you success in achieving this hope, or making sure that you do well in bringing this hope to life. I am Blessing H. 7 a.m. West African time is when you will have the opportunity of enjoying the show again tomorrow. Enjoy your day, and don't forget to stay with Sook News, as there are more. Olaoluwa Aware is bringing Business Insight at 10 a.m.